The low hum of celebration buzzed through the walls as I sat in a metal chair in the storage room of the Four Seasons Hotel. My father's 65th birthday party was in full swing in the ballroom just down the hall, lavish, loud, and as fake as the smiles painted across my family's faces. I adjusted my simple black dress, though simple wasn't quite the word. It was a one-of-a-kind piece by a designer so exclusive even my sister Victoria hadn't heard of them. But to the rest of my family, I was just Emma the disappointment. The invisible one. Victoria appeared in the doorway, a glass of champagne in her hand and a smirk on her lips. Her Dior gown shimmered under the hallway lights as she tilted her head at me. "Dinner will be served soon, Emma. Try not to make noise back here. The important guests might hear you." I gave her a smile, so sweet it probably gave her cavities. "Of course, Victoria. Wouldn't want to ruin your perfect evening." She glanced around the storage room, folding chairs, tablecloths, boxes of candles. "The servants' quarters suit you, though I suppose it's better than your usual. What do you call it again? Your office?" Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my lap. It was Marcus, my chief operations officer. "Sterling Industries acquisition of Global Tech complete. $8.2 billion deal finalized. Waiting for your signature." I smiled slightly. The office Victoria mocked was the top floor of Sterling Tower A. Floor with a private elevator and views that made this hotel look like a roadside motel. Outside the door, I heard my mother's voice. "Victoria, the Richardsons are asking about Emma." I told them she's indisposed. "Good save, mother," Victoria replied. "We can't have people knowing she's actually here. It would ruin the atmosphere." The atmosphere had cost a fortune. Crystal chandeliers, walls draped in fresh flowers, a live string quartet, and imported champagne. What none of them knew was that the hotel belonged to one of my company's subsidiaries. Every extravagant detail had been booked and billed through businesses I controlled. In fact, their entire over-the-top event had ultimately just funneled money back to me. From the ballroom, I heard my father's booming voice echo across the marble floors. "My daughter Victoria has made the Morgan name proud. She understands real business, real success." I checked the latest update on my net worth, $12.4 billion, as of this morning. Victoria's entire year as a bank VP wouldn't even cover what I earned in interest in a week. Then Brad appeared, Victoria's husband and the human version of a LinkedIn profile. "Still playing with your little tech startup?" he said, swirling champagne in his glass. "You know, my bank is always looking for entry-level positions. Something more stable." I almost laughed. His bank had begged me for a meeting just last week to manage Sterling's accounts. They'd been politely declined, of course. "Thanks, Brad," I said. "I'll keep that in mind." Then my mother reappeared, looking flustered. "Emma, please stay quiet. Victoria has the governor sitting near this wall, and we can't have any disturbances." The governor, who had called me 3 times this week about tech contracts for the state. But sure, let's not disturb the atmosphere. My phone buzzed again. "Marcus, legal team standing by. Global Tech board ready. Waiting on your signature." Another message followed. "Your father's company just tried to bid on the Richardson contract." I smiled wider. The same $500 million infrastructure contract my father's firm thought they had in the bag. The one Sterling Industries had quietly secured 2 weeks ago. "She's still hiding in there," Victoria said to someone outside. "Maybe this will finally teach her that tech dreams don't mean real success." Real success. I thought about the quantum computing patents Sterling held, about the AI systems being used in government agencies, about the clean energy initiative we were rolling out in 5 countries. But to them, I was still the failure daughter. Then my father's voice cut through the air again. "If you're going to hide back there, Emma, at least make yourself useful. The hotel's running low on champagne." Victoria popped her head in again. "You heard Daddy. At least you can manage carrying boxes, right?" I stood slowly, adjusting my black dress. My watch, a subtle Patek Philippe, caught the light. "Of course, sister dear," I said softly. "Anything to help the party run smoothly." As I headed for the service elevator, my phone lit up. Again, urgent. "Global Tech merger requires CEO signature immediately. Legal team en route to your location." I grinned. Let the games begin. I stepped into the service elevator with the quiet confidence of someone holding the fate of half the ballroom in her clutch. While the world upstairs toasted to my father's legacy, I was about to finalize a deal that would make his firm obsolete by Monday. The elevator doors closed with a soft chime, separating me from the noise, the judgments, and the hollow toasts. My assistant Leah was already waiting in the lounge one floor down, laptop open and a document glowing on the screen. Is this it? I asked, already knowing the answer. Leah nodded, eyes wide. All the final signatures. Global Tech's board has approved. Once you sign, it's official. Sterling Industries will control 61% of their assets and their patents. Perfect, I said, pulling the stylus from my clutch. In a few swift strokes, my signature sealed the fate of an entire sector. The deal wasn't just about money. It was about leverage, power, timing, and timing was everything. Should I notify Marcus? Leah asked, watching me with reverence. She had only joined me 6 months ago and still seemed to forget that the woman in the plain dress and heels that never clicked to loudly ran a company worth more than several Fortune 500 seconds combined. Not yet, I said. I want them to enjoy their cake. Leah smiled. Speaking of which, should I prep the other files? Yes. Get the Richardson contract ready for release. And have legal pull the clauses tied to Morgan and Co. They'll realize what happened by dessert. Back in the elevator, I caught my reflection. Calm, unreadable, deliberate. I didn't need validation, not from my family, but I would enjoy watching their faces when everything unraveled. I re-entered the service hallway just in time to hear laughter. Victoria again. She's probably writing blog posts about startups from the back room. She snickered. I mean, what kind of grown woman plays CEO on LinkedIn? Her friend, someone from her investment firm, laughed hard. It's cute though. She always looked like she wanted to be something more. Some people just peak early. I walked right past them, neither stopping nor acknowledging. I didn't need to. In less than 24 hours, her firm would be calling mine for a rescue package they didn't even know they needed. The ballroom doors opened as I stepped inside. 1,000 crystal lights sparkled above rows of long tables, and the air smelled like money, perfume, gold leaf desserts, and politics. Every socialite and senator my family had ever courted sat with champagne and hollow ambition, clinking glasses to a name they thought they understood. At the head of the room sat my father, tall, loud, proud, the kind of man who built a business in the 80s and still ran it like it was 1985. Beside him, Victoria beamed like she owned the city. I took my seat quietly at the far end of the room, tucked between distant cousins and barely important plus ones. The kind of placement designed to send a message. Nice of you to finally show, said Brad from across the table. Victoria thought you might have snuck out the back. I almost did, I replied, sipping water. But I figured something interesting might happen tonight. My father stood, raising his glass. To family, he boomed, to legacy, and to the future of Morgan and Co., which will soon close one of the biggest contracts in our firm's history. Polite applause rippled through the room. I noticed Victoria glance at her phone, smirking as she leaned in to whisper to her husband. I checked mine. Marcus had just texted. Richardson contract released. Public announcement scheduled in 2 hours. Morgan and Co. blacklisted from further consideration. I took another sip of water. Victoria stood next. And to my sister, she said with a forced smile, who's with us tonight? Emma may not work in our family business, but she's always good for moral support. Scattered laughter. I smiled as if flattered. Brad leaned in again. So, what do you actually do these days? I looked him dead in the eye. I rearrange furniture. He blinked. Sorry, what? You know, I said, tilting my head. Move companies around. Shift some power here. Slide some influence there. Like furniture. Quiet work. But everything feels different after. Before he could respond, Leah appeared beside me, whispering, it's done. Press release goes out in 30 minutes. It's already trending internally on Global Tech servers. I stood and excused myself. Just before stepping out, I turned to the room and raised my own glass. To family, I echoed. And to the kind of legacy that doesn't require applause to exist. No one paid attention. Not yet. But they would. Be why the time dessert was served. Everything would change. The ballroom hummed with music and conversation, but I could already see the cracks forming, small, jagged fractures in the polished illusion my family had carefully crafted. As the string quartet played something forgettable, I scrolled my phone beneath the table. The press release had dropped. The industry boards were already reacting. Global Tech's name was everywhere, but not beside Morgan and Co. I had drafted the release myself. It was elegant, restrained, and lethal. Sterling Industries announces strategic acquisition of Global Tech's AI and Defense Division, positioning the firm as a market leader in applied intelligence systems. Deal negotiated and led by CEO E.M. Sterling. The initials were deliberate, no full name, just enough to stir speculation. From across the room, I saw Victoria's husband frown at his phone. His brows drew together slowly, and then he leaned into her ear. I could tell from the way her back stiffened that she had just read the headline. Seconds later, her gaze snapped to me. I smiled. She stood up abruptly, murmured something to Dad, and stalked out of the ballroom, clutching her clutch like it might bite her. Brad was next. He excused himself and practically jogged after her. I knew exactly where they were headed, the corridor near the coach room, where reception was better. It was time. I walked casually through the marble hallway, pretending to admire the portraits of long-dead donors. When I turned the corner, their voices reached me. How is this possible? Victoria hissed. Brad's voice was a panicked whisper. Global Tech was ours. They were in talks. Dad said, well, they're not anymore. Sterling Industries? Who the hell even are they? I leaned against the corner and said clearly, I hear they rearrange furniture. Both heads whipped toward me. What do you know about this? Victoria asked, venom in her voice. Plenty, I said calmly. For starters, they're not in talks with Morgan and Co. anymore. In fact, I believe your firm has just been blacklisted from 3 upcoming contracts. Something about disclosure violations and a conflict of interest. Sloppy paperwork, really. Victoria stared at me like I'd grown horns. That's not possible, Brad muttered. Only a handful of people had access to that contract language. I looked directly at him, and one of them knew exactly how to exploit the holes. Victoria stepped closer. Are you seriously trying to act like you had something to do with this? I took out my phone and flipped it around. The press release glowed under the chandelier's reflection. CEO E.M. Sterling. I tapped the logo. The screen shifted to the dashboard of Sterling Industries, an internal system with live market data, cascading buyout alerts, and a projected revenue graph soaring upward. Victoria went pale. No, she said. No, this is a joke. It's not, I replied. I founded Sterling Industries 8 years ago, quietly. While you were busy with magazine covers and Dad's business cards, I was hiring engineers, building partnerships, acquiring competitors. You laughed at my failed startup. You mocked me at dinners. And now you report to me if you want to keep your clients. You're lying, Brad whispered. Am I? I showed him another screen, an internal memo signed by Global Tech's board. I've spent years preparing for this moment. Every insult, every time you called me the disappointment, every time you seated me next to someone's second cousin at family events. It added fuel. Victoria looked like she'd been slapped. Why didn't you just tell us? Tell you? I laughed quietly. You never listened. You decided who I was before I had a chance to be anything else. For a moment, silence. Then Victoria's eyes narrowed. This doesn't change anything. Morgan and Co. is still our family's firm. Dad will never. I'm not here to fight you, Victoria, I interrupted. I'm here to win. And with that, I walked past her, leaving her standing in a puddle of her own shock. Back inside the ballroom, Dad was giving a speech. He was in the middle of praising Victoria's leadership when his voice faltered. Someone had just shown him their phone. Then another. The whispers spread like wildfire, and then came the real blow. Leah entered through the main doors, holding a printed folder. She handed it directly to my father. He opened it slowly, scanning the first few lines. His face drained of color. What is this? He demanded, voice louder than necessary. Sterling Industries' formal offer to acquire Morgan & Co.'s remaining assets, I said calmly, stepping up beside him. You're bankrupt, Dad. You just don't know it yet. Gasps. Someone dropped a fork. Victoria burst back in at that exact moment, her voice shrill. She's lying. She's making this all up. But I was already handing the microphone to the MC. Excuse me, I said smoothly. I think now's a good time for a toast. The MC, stunned but obedient, handed it over. I turned to the crowd, raised my glass, and said, to reinvention, to building in the shadows, and to finally stepping into the light. The silence after my toast lasted just long enough to sting. Then came the murmur, a low wave of gasps, shocked whispers, and camera phones discreetly lifted. The ballroom's glittering illusion was cracking in real time. Every guest who had once pitied or ignored me now stared like I'd grown wings. Or horns. My father stood frozen, the acquisition folder trembling in his hand. Victoria's face was red with fury, but Brad looked almost gray. The weight of realization was sinking in, and yet Dad still tried to regain control. "This is a joke," he growled, voice tight. "You don't have the kind of leverage to make an offer like this." I turned to him calmly. "Actually, I do. Morgan & Co. has been hemorrhaging clients for over a year. Your last 3 projects defaulted or came in over budget. You leveraged everything to close a defense contract that Global Tech just pulled. Your line of credit was personally guaranteed by you and Victoria." I paused, then added with soft cruelty, "The bank will call it in by Monday." He swayed slightly, gripping the back of a chair. "You think you can just walk in and take over?" Victoria snapped. "This is our legacy." "No," I corrected her. "It was. You made sure I was never part of that legacy. You turned me into a cautionary tale at every dinner party. Don't be like her, the sister who gave up everything for a silly dream." I gave a half smile. "Turns out, that dream bought yours." Brad stepped forward. "We can renegotiate. Maybe there's room for partnership." "Partnership?" I tilted my head. "You mean like when you offered me a junior analyst role last year? After I already own 2 of your subcontractors." Victoria's voice broke. "You've been planning this for years." "I had to," I said. "Because every time I reached out, tried to prove myself, you slammed the door. So I built my own house. One that you now work inside whether you realize it or not." Across the ballroom, the crowd was shifting. Some guests quietly left, whispering apologies or nods respectfully as they passed me. Others watched in fascinated silence. Among them, I saw Aunt Julia, my mother's older sister, watching with tears in her eyes. She had once told me I reminded her of my mother. I hoped that was true. Now, Dad tried one last move. "This isn't over. I still have board seats. I can block this." I shook my head. "You did. But the board held an emergency vote this morning. I offered to absorb company debts, protect employee pensions, and transition all key staff. They accepted unanimously. Your shares are now symbolic, and your position as chairman is no longer active." He stared at me like he didn't understand the words. "You're cutting me out." "I'm offering you retirement, Dad," I said gently. "Something you never offered me." Victoria finally lost it. "You think this is noble? You're a traitor. You ambushed your own family." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I gave you every chance. But when you lock someone out of the house long enough, don't be surprised when they build a mansion next door." She lunged, like she might slap me. But Brad held her back. "It's done," he said quietly, reading the room. "Let it go." She yanked her arm free and stormed out, heels echoing like gunshots. I turned to my father. He was no longer angry, just tired. His shoulders sagged under the weight of it all. "I never wanted it to be like this," I said softly. He looked at me for a long moment, and then did something I didn't expect. He nodded, just once, then he walked out. The ballroom remained still for a beat. Then the MC stepped forward, trying to resume the evening with nervous energy. "Ladies and gentlemen, dessert will be served shortly." I handed the mic back, suddenly exhausted. Leah appeared at my side, with a glass of champagne. "Well," she said, "that went smoother than expected." I gave a half laugh. "Did it? You didn't cry, slap anyone, or throw a drink," she said. "By Morgan standards, that's practically a miracle." I took the champagne. "Remind me to send the staff a bonus." They had to witness that entire circus. Already done. We walked to the back of the room where my executive team waited discreetly. A few nodded in quiet congratulations. None of them looked surprised. They had known who I was from the beginning. Not Morgan's failure of a daughter. Not the quiet one with the useless business degree. Just Ava, CEO, visionary, builder. Outside the ballroom, the press was already gathering. Cameras flashing, headlines forming. I knew what they would say. Family power shift. Sister outmaneuvers dynasty. Ava Morgan's silent coup. Let them. The truth was simpler. I had always been the capable one. The strategist. The quiet storm they never saw coming. As we exited through the private elevator, Leah nudged me. "You ready for the next phase?" I nodded. "Let's clean up what's left of Morgan & Co. Then we move on." "To what?" I smiled. "Legacy. On my terms." 3 weeks after the gala, Morgan & Co. no longer existed. At least, not by that name. The final paperwork had been signed, press statements released, and transition meetings held with every department head. The gold-plated signage on the old corporate building was replaced with the sleek black and silver emblem of Aurelia Group, a name I'd chosen years ago, inspired by the Latin word for golden. Because after everything, I wanted to build something that lasted, something rare and untarnished, something they could never claim as their own. The first thing I did was hold a company-wide meeting, not in some posh hotel, but in the same gray, outdated auditorium where I'd once been told I wasn't family business material. This time, every employee was there to hear me speak. Some of you know me as Ava Morgan, I began, but many of you never got the chance. I was the one they left off the org charts, the one whose ideas were laughed out of boardrooms. That's over now. And we're not just changing names, we're changing everything. I laid out my vision: transparency, innovation, employee ownership programs, community reinvestment, and sustainable expansion. Not just profit, purpose. When I finished, there was silence, then a roar of applause. Not out of obligation, out of hope. Later that week, I stood in my new office corner window, high rise, the kind I once cleaned for internships. The space was modern, bright, and free of the old Morgan oil paintings and golf trophies. I replaced them with two things: a framed photo of my mother and me, and the original draft of the Aurelia mission, scribbled on the back of a receipt from a ramen shop where Leah and I first brainstormed it. Leah walked in carrying a box. "This just came in from legal," she said, placing it on my desk. "Old ownership files. Thought you might want to see what your father and Victoria left behind." I opened the box slowly. Inside were ledgers, contracts, and a thick manila envelope marked confidential. I pulled it out and opened it, expecting old memos or personal attacks. Instead, I found a letter, handwritten, from my father. "Ava, if you're reading this, then I suppose you did what I never believed possible. You beat me. I won't pretend. I'm proud, ego rarely allows for that, but I am humbled. You always had something I didn't: the ability to listen before you speak, the strength to walk away instead of fight every battle. Maybe I saw those as weakness. I was wrong. You earned this. And if you're half the leader I now believe you are, you'll do more with this company than I ever could. Take care of the people. Take care of yourself." Charlessie stared at the words for a long time, unsure how to feel. Was it regret? Closure? Too little too late? I folded the letter neatly and locked it in my desk. A few days later, I received an invitation. A small family brunch, just my father, Brad, and my cousin Julia. No Victoria. I went. The cafe was quiet. Dad looked older, tired, but no longer hostile. Brad stood when I arrived and offered an awkward but genuine smile. "You won," he said, half laughing. "I still can't believe it." "I didn't want to win against you," I said simply. "I wanted to win beside you. But none of you made space." Dad stirred his coffee. "We didn't know how. You didn't want to try." Silence. Then he looked up. "Would you consider someday helping us rebuild? Not the old firm, just us." I studied him. For the first time, he wasn't commanding, just asking. "Human." "I'll think about it," I said, sipping my tea. Brad nodded slowly. "Fair enough." We talked for another hour about Mom, about how different things might have been. I didn't forgive everything, but I didn't carry it forward either, because revenge wasn't my ending. It was just the turning point. 6 months later, Forbes did a cover story, "The Quiet Heiress Who Rewrote the Game." They called me a disruptor, a visionary, a comeback story wrapped in silk and steel. But those titles didn't matter. What mattered was walking through Aurelia's headquarters and seeing the people thriving. The single mother who got promoted to VP of product, the former intern now leading our social impact division, the janitor who became a shareholder. That was my legacy. Not wealth, not power, but building a world I once begged to be let into and now opened for others. And late at night, when I walked through the silent halls, I sometimes paused outside the founder's plaque. My name was etched there now: Ava Morgan, founder and CEO. Aurelia Groupie smiled, because the girl they once dismissed as the quiet sister had become the woman who reshaped an empire, not for revenge, for something far more lasting: respect.